My name is Susan Cooney. I'm actually going to be the moderator today for the panel. I've got a fantastic panel joining me. I am currently the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Symantec, at LifeLock, and at Norton. We are moving forward with several of our employee resource groups, specifically around disability. We are working closely with many of our employees around these topics, and we're bringing more conversations to the broader community. We're in 52 different countries. This is a big conversation. It's an important conversation, and I'm excited to be a part of it. So thank you for welcoming me to the discussion. So I'd like to give the floor to our panelists. We've got Yen, Somaya, and Daniel joining us tonight, this morning, and if they could take a chance to introduce themselves, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Yen Trang. I'm currently a product manager at Blend. We're a financial technology startup trying to bring transparency, simplicity, and accessibility to consumer lending. So there I'm a product manager helping work with engineers and designers to bring that idea to reality. I'm also previously was the director of finance of an organization called Little People of America. It's a national nonprofit organization that helps individuals with dwarfism, which is a condition I have. So with that organization, we're helping support and advocacy and just general support for the community. And quick shout out to my mom, came out to support, as well as other folks at Blend in the back row.
My name is Somaya Adu, and I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant for Embedded Consulting. And I help organizations with inclusion on a wide variety of ways to support traditionally marginalized groups. As you can see from me, I'm obviously a woman. I'm African American, but I have a hidden disability. And I'm here to just share my perspective on that and share it from both ends on how I both support organizations and how I, as a person, am able to move throughout the workplace as well.
Hi, my name is Daniel Sonnenfeld. I work here at Salesforce doing technical program management, and I'm also the global president for Ability Force, which is one of the sponsors of this event today, so it's great to be here. From my own personal journey, I was born deaf, profoundly deaf. I wore hearing aids most of my life, and now I have cochlear implants. It's funny, I talk about that I came out as a gay person in my early teens, but I was very much in denial of being different as a deaf person because my parents had so much inculcated on speaking and hearing and kept me away from the deaf community. So it's only in my 20s that I started learning sign language and getting more involved with the deaf community. And I have a long history of activism, especially in corporate workplace, having been on the leadership for LGBTQ organizations in the workplace. And 3 years ago, I co-founded Ability Force here at Salesforce.
All right. Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate that very much. As you can see, we've got an amazing panel up here, and we're going to go a little deeper, quick, and get to know people a little bit more. So my first question is, how has having a disability shaped your approach to your career?
I'll go first. I want to talk about the aspect in which my disability shows up. I have some cervical neck issues, and I am permanently disabled. Disability is one of those things that can literally happen to anyone at any time. You know, they say youth is wasted on the young, and I was approaching 40 and typing away on my computer and literally like could not type another letter on my computer because my hands were like curled up in pain. And that led a long 1.5-year journey of carpal tunnel surgery and elbow surgeries on both sides to kind of correct some of that. And then found out that it was my neck that was causing the issue. So that's a work-related injury, right? I ended up going through the workers' comp process, and I'm sharing that because there are 2.9 million people who experience workplace injury, and that ranges from repetitive stress injury, which is what I had, to an actual incident. So that's important to note, and you as employees to kind of speak up and work with your employers on supporting you throughout that process. So how it's impacted me is I ended up working for myself. I am the founder of my own consulting business. And I did that for a variety of reasons because initially I had a lot of pain and wasn't sure if I was able to go back to full-time work. It's been a 4-year journey of doctors and surgeries and all these things to get me back up to speed. And it's to the place where I'm doing well, but I know kind of what I need to be accommodated in the workplace, and I'm also stronger to be able to handle, a full kind of time work. So I'm a little bit unique situation in that I work for myself, but I've in a great place to where I know kind of how to ask for what I need to get my work accomplished.
Yen?
I think one of the main things that has influenced me is it's made me much more intentional about where I work in terms of sort of when you're evaluating a workplace. You want to find a place that allows you to come to work with your full self. You want to work at a place where you buy in with the mission. You want to work at a place where the people truly energize and challenge and invigorate you, because sort of that culmination of those three factors really allows you to be your best self. And then so I think that's sort of an approach that I've taken both in finding a place to work as well as like the people that you try to surround yourself with. And then it's really made me more intentional around being more, I guess, self-reflective of these are the things that I know I'm really good at, these are the things that I'm okay at, and then these are the things that I'm bad at. So then when I'm choosing a place to work or when I'm choosing a place like coworkers, it really makes you be a little bit more intentional about that decision, which I think is good advice regardless of whether you have an ability or a disability.
I was just going to comment on that. That's great advice across the board for all talent, any company, really having that understanding and confidence in yourself about what you bring to the table, just the talent that you bring and finding the right match. So thank you for bringing that up. Awesome. Daniel, thoughts on how has having a disability shaped your approach to your career?
I think it made me very aware of my limitation and what I need in terms of accommodation. So kind of to your point of wanting to work someplace where I can bring my whole self to work and not feel I need to hide being deaf, which would be a hard thing to do anyway. I tend to succeed better at large companies, both by the nature of the work I do, which is technical program management, but also because I find that it's easier to get the accommodations that I need. I've found that working in a small company, they get a lot more concerned about the cost of sign language interpreters or accommodation, whereas large companies often, they're really trying to hire people with disabilities.
Good point. And I'm going to follow up with you because I've got another question that I want you to kind of weigh in on. When it comes to the challenges that you may have faced in the workplace in terms of getting hired, staying engaged, and achieving your career goals, have you ever felt tokenized in terms of your disability?
That's a great question. Let me kind of define my perspective on being tokenized is when I'm hired or placed on a team, not because of my own abilities, but rather because they're trying to fill a quota, or we go back to the Jesse talk about the different models and kind of the tragedy model. Oh, here's a poor deaf person, let's make sure that he or she has a job. So a lot of that goes down to having the very upfront, frank conversation, talk about, if I'm working on a team where everybody is virtual and all the communication is by phone, that's probably not going to be a successful job for me. So let's avoid putting me in those type of jobs. But at the same time, don't put me in an easy job because you're concerned that I won't be able to understand. Let me try to figure out accommodation and set my own baseline. So I have had concerns about being tokenized, but the best way to get around that is having very open conversation. Sometimes those conversations can be difficult.
Excellent. Thank you very much. As far as this follow-up question, tell us about your experience of disclosing your disability. Was it easy? Was it difficult? Did you feel you needed to? Were you pressured into it? Any thoughts, Sumaya?
Yeah, obviously with the work I do within diversity inclusion, I talk about it a lot because I have an invisible disability. And 62% of people who have disabilities have invisible disabilities. I talk about it a lot because I'm an intersectional person, which means I belong to all these buckets of marginalization, but I also have privilege. And I say that because I have an invisible disability, people are going to treat me a certain way when they initially see me that they won't treat someone who has a visible disability. I may be thought that I'm incompetent or not up to snuff for different reasons than a disability, right? So that is kind of the paradox and the kind of complication of both intersectionality and hierarchy as we look at it in the workplace. So I think it's really important for me to disclose it because I want to bring attention to it. I want people to understand that, you know, it isn't always something that you see. And then I also can own both the kind of the privilege that comes with that, as well as understanding what my own limitations are. So for me, disclosing it is just very much a part of who I am. I will say, in me looking at full-time roles, I do think about when to disclose it, right? That's very real. I'm already an African American woman. I have a funny name. I've had to change my name on my resume to Nicole just to get interviews in my past. So I do worry about that being another layer of me not getting the job. But then I'm also like, well, my first day on the job, I'll be like, okay, great, I'm here. So I need this, and I need this, and I need this. Thank you very much. So I'll be honest and vulnerable and say that's something I do think about. So it is a paradox.
I can totally see that. And, you know, I guess this moves into kind of any kind of misconceptions. So now you've either disclosed your disability, you might have a visual disability. What are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about your disability?
Yeah, I would say it's similar to what was mentioned earlier around one of the first two models, whether it was a tragedy model around disability, around that sort of folks with disability need help, or that for some reason there is a lack of ability there. Whereas I think it's really empowering to think about it from the third model, the empowering model of sort of people with disabilities are in control. We do have our own decisions, and I think, and we're more unique than we are different, and I think that's an important misconception that a lot of people have around every story is different, whether it's a physical disability or a mental disability, and it's something that I think really resonates with a lot of people.
Nyan, let me follow up on that one. When you do encounter someone who has, you know, the tragedy model, or they respond that way, how do you respond, and how do you manage that conversation?
I mean, I think I'm much better at it now than I was previously. Luckily, I had a role model in my mom to have those honest conversations. But I think at the end of the day, I think most people just really mean well. They have good intentions for the most part. So I think I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. I try to sort of state my observation and then just try to educate them and really connect with them at a human level and tell them sort of something that they probably don't know. And then hopefully after that interaction, the next time they encounter someone, that can sort of shape their interaction with that later person. But I think just having open and honest conversations, being a little vulnerable, similar to what Jesse had said, like, I think it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to always be uncomfortable. Like, sitting up here with this heated screen is slightly uncomfortable. But, like, it's only for another 45 minutes and I'll get by. So I think having those uncomfortable but important conversations are important to have.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Just wanted to add one thing to that. To your point of having those conversations, I mean, because of my cochlear implant, looked very newfangled. People are, oh, that Bluetooth? Oh, what is that? And then kind of going from that so let's start having more of a conversation, and then it does seem more than just a person with disability, but some other aspect of oneself, and then that you start creating an ally.
what additional advice would you give to a potential ally around becoming more comfortable and or courageous around conversations with someone who has a hidden or visible disability?
I would say one thing is, depending on the person, some people have a sort of tough time asking for help. They feel like that's, they don't want to say no, and they don't want to feel like they don't have the ability to do something. But in my interactions with people, the times in which I feel like people are more willing to ask for help is sort of when you yourself are asking for help or vulnerable. Like, whether you have ability or a disability, everyone needs help in their own way. So when you're sort of making yourself vulnerable, extending yourself out there, I think that helps create a more human bond. Because a lot of times we're at work, we sort of try to put up a facade of like, you have everything together, whereas like most times you don't have it together. So whether it's a coworker without a disability or especially a coworker that has a disability, I think something that will help foster a more genuine interaction with them is sort of you're just genuine with them. And then that will increase the chances that that person will be genuine with you in terms of sort of asking for accommodations when needed and just having that honest conversation.
Excellent, thank you. Do you want to weigh in?
So I think of myself. Obviously, again, I don't have a disability that's like immediately recognizable. But I look at how I've encouraged inclusive conversations at organizations. And a big question, similar to what Yan said, is that like everyone has their own way. One, their disabilities vary, right? And then also they have their own personality types. I'm a very proud person. I don't like to feel pitied. It's in the world that I live in. I already have a challenge of, okay, I'm African American, I gotta kind of deal with that, and then I'm a woman, and people kind of underestimating me. So the best thing I've heard someone say, and what I've used to kind of coach people on, is just asking, hey, how can I support you, right? But asking it in a loving and way, and not like, well, how can I support you? Like your body language matters. Like giving someone that dignity and the respect that they are more than worthy of, and asking, hey, I'm going to normalize this. Hey, how can I support you? Do you need anything? Cool. I also think removing roadblocks. So allyship is not just about supporting the person when you're in front of them, but it's also making sure that things are ready for them. So similar to what he said, Dan said about being on a call, right? Maybe when you're sending out your invitations for calls, asking, hey, is there any accommodations that I should be making for this call? Because if you cannot see, being on a video call may not be the best format for you, right? If you have accessibility issues for events that you plan, is the happy hour that you're planning, does it have accessible seating, right? And it's doing those things. It's asking the question, is there anyone that needs accommodations? But it's also you knowing who's on your team and who you're representing and solving that problem before they even walk into the space, right? That's what being an ally is. It's removing roadblocks from someone who, without even having to ask, right? And it's just a normal part of what you do. Another way to really support people is to amplify their voice as well. So we know that people who have a disability may not be perceived in a certain way, right? In terms of receiving the same respect for their input. So being able to amplify their voice in meetings and their contributions to things can be really important in making sure that they're seen as the contributors and productive people that they are.
Excellent, thank you very much. And kind of riffing off of that, tell us about a time, or tell us about your first great ally at work, who really came in, stepped up, and was a fantastic ally, and what that meant to you at the time.
Quite a while ago, when I first started working at Oracle, and I think with my first, I've worked at a lot of high-tech companies, but this was the first job that I took when I was had established reputation as an engineer. And my boss had one of my first projects was a really big, hairy, audacious goal. And it felt great to not be just given a little project because, oh, we now have a deaf person working there. But it's like, we acknowledge you for your engineering talent. Here's a big project for you to work on. So it goes back to the point of not being tokenized and being recognized for what I could bring to the team.
Excellent example. Thank you very much. So, Samaya, you gave some great examples of what companies and what people can do to be more inclusive of people with disabilities. What are your thoughts on when it comes to recruiting, interviewing, moving folks with hidden or visible disabilities through the talent pipeline? What are some of your thoughts or advice there to companies and those folks who are in HR in the audience here about how we can be more inclusive around that area, more accommodating, and start to remove some of those biases that may have creeped into that process?
So I just finished an equity audit with an organization, and the biggest takeaway was they weren't prepared for anyone with disabilities, their own employees, or anyone who walked through their doors. And I will say a lot of companies who are, especially small or mid-sized companies, aren't necessarily prepared because maybe they haven't had to deal with the situation. I also know in doing this work, there's been engineers who have been deaf or hard of hearing, and during the interview, a recruiter reaches out to them, hey, I'd like to interview you. Great. Can we set up an interpreter? Crickets. The recruiter won't even continue the process, right? Do we think that recruiter is just being biased? Or are they freaking out because they're like, well, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to suffer in silence and just completely ignore a candidate, right? So a lot of the work I do with organizations is tell them to get ready. The first thing the company said that I did the audit with, well, we've never had. Well, you're going to. And if you have inclusion efforts going on, you're really going to, right? Because this is an outreach effort. So I'd say get your accommodation plan ready for both your employees. What is the process? Where does a manager go when employee comes to them and says, hey, I have a disability. Hey, I broke my leg. Hey, I have a mental illness and I need support. What does that manager do? So get a process together for your managers and then give them the tools and resources so they can properly handle it and there's not any potential discriminatory actions that may derive from that situation. Secondly, Jesse had a great resource there, the Ask Jan. That's a great resource in terms of making accommodations in the workplace. Lastly, being able to just measure where your company is in terms of supporting people with the wide range of disabilities. And the tool I tell organizations to use for that is the Disability Equality Index. That is a phenomenal tool, and it literally goes from the accessibility of your website for various people with disabilities to even get information from your website from a technical perspective, all the way to how are you engaging, do you have an ERG, what are the resources available for people, again, with a wide range of employees. Even the building space, right? So by law, a building has to be accessible and meet certain guidelines, but people put up furniture and tables and all these things that, again, you might have a vendor with a disability, you might have someone that walks through your doors that you may not be properly set up to support. So the index is great for that in terms of just having a broad range of tools to ask you questions that you may not even be thinking about.
Excellent. And you mentioned ERGs or employee resource groups. I guess the question to the panel now is, does your company have an employee resource group? And if they do, what role do they have in creating a more inclusive environment for people with disabilities?
So as I mentioned, I'm the global president for Ability Force. So that is what we call Ohana Group. Ohana, as Catherine mentioned in the opening talk, means family, and these are the equivalent of employee resource groups. So I find that employee resource group can be a great tool for creating awareness, building the knowledge, helping people be able to stand up and be comfortable talking about their own disabilities and getting allies. And obtaining allies is the most important thing. We are a global network for people with disabilities and allies. The great majority of our membership today, we have about almost 2,000 members of Ability Force worldwide out of total company of 32,000 employees, so it's significant. We're still growing, but I would say a very small fraction of our entire membership are actually people with disability. Many of them are employees who have family members with disabilities or had friends and have that personal passion around it. So by creating that network and raising the awareness makes those conversations easier to have. And also for new employees that come in, knowing that we are a resource for them. So it helps in many different ways, both for the person with disability, for allies, and for everyone else in general.
Thank you very much.
So we have a number of ERGs at Blend, but now that I reflect on it, I don't think we have one specifically for disabilities. So I guess my specific takeaway from this event will be when I get back to the office, I will take the next steps to create one.
And I like what Dan said about allies. I think it's important to engage them in any ERG, but especially persons with disabilities. I think it's also important for senior leaders to come out with their disabilities. That's a great modeling for the organization. It makes the leaders more vulnerable. And it also destigmatizes it. So a CEO at a company I've been working with is hearing impaired. And I only knew because he asked me to sit on the other side of the table from him so that he could hear. And I'm like, ooh. And throughout the process, when I gave my final recommendation, I was like, you know, I really recommend you come out to your employees as having a disability. And he's a straight white male, and he's been hiding it for so long, he never thought of himself that way. And he's like, well, why would I say that? And I'm like, because you'd be modeling a person with a disability, you're the CEO of the company, like that would make a huge impact on people, just making it a safe place to share it, make you seem vulnerable. And it destigmatizes it as being something that is hurtful or someone who doesn't have the ability to function in a workplace. So I think it's really important from a position of privilege and allyship to destigmatize and talk about these things and make them normative to have discussions about in the workplace.
That's a huge point. Becoming that role model, building trust, building alliances. These are conversations we want to have more of, and to have a CEO to be a courageous leader is to have that kind of disclosure. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to kind of finish with one final question here, and then we're going to move into a Q&A. We've got so many great topics. We've got a great panel. I'd like to hear from you and kind of continue the conversation. So Yen already started and said he's taken an action to introduce a disability ERG, perhaps at his company. I'd like to end the conversation on action. And it really is about what actions can we take in this room. So looking for advice from you. What actions can we take in this room to really start to drive this conversation forward and build more allyship for folks with hidden invisible disabilities?
So in addition to, I thought the resources that Jesse had shared earlier today were fantastic. So I'd certainly recommend all 4 or 5 of those links. But an additional ask or request that I would have of everyone here is to, when you get back from this event, tell one person, ideally more, who you wouldn't have expected to come to an event like this, sort of your biggest takeaway from this event, and really encourage them the next time you go to an event like this to bring them along. So then I think slowly that snowball of sort of allies and people involved in this conversation will slowly increase. So find someone that you think would not have come to this event, tell them sort of the one great takeaway that you've had from this event, and then encourage them to go to the next event that you attend?
I'd say be uncomfortable. A lot of the stigmatization around persons with disabilities is really more about you and the way you feel uncomfortable being around them or just being exposed to them. So sit with that energy and like work through that, because that is what's going to help you be a better support to them, is by dealing with your own stuff. And I'd say just feel empowered to be an ally. I have my and part of that is just owning your privilege, as well as owning kind of your the things that make you exclusionary. I was just sitting at a coffee shop the other day, and there was a blind couple that walked in. They were dropped off by the Uber driver, and they were in the wrong place. And they kind of walked in and then walked out, and I could tell they were confused. And there was many people looking at them, and so I just got up. I'm like, "Where do you guys need to go?" They needed to go across the street. I walked them across the street, and I walked back in, and a couple people were like, "Oh my gosh, that was so wonderful of you." And I was like, it's something we can all do. Like, I don't have any special magic. I just took action. I saw someone who needed help, and I treated them like they were normal. And obviously I have a different perspectives because maybe I have a disability, but like that's what privilege is. I have feet and I have sight, so why not help someone who can't do that? So just normalize these things and feel empowered to just take action. And how can I support you? What do you need? Let's go.
That's a great example. Thank you very much. Daniel?
So one great thing that come out from Salesforce, makes me very proud to work here, is we have an Office of Equality and a Chief Equality Officer. You can find out more at salesforce.com/equality. And they have a great ally program, and it's 4 pretty easy things: ask, listen, show up, speak up. So ask questions, have those difficult conversations. Someone with a disability, learn about their disability. So that's ask and listen. Then show up at events like this. And when you see something, speak up. If someone makes a derogatory joke about a person with disability, say, hey, that wasn't really cool.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you all.